I'm Alex Perry, host of the Practically Speaking podcast, where I demystify and simplify public speaking so you can say what you need and want to say. And here we are. We're on episode number 6. I'm so excited. We have made it a long way since I have launched this fledgling podcast of mine. And I'm excited today because I am answering another question from one of my friends and colleagues. And this person is Brad Tunn. And Brad is an account executive at One Cause, which is an organization that helps cause-driven organizations amplify their message and raise more funds with easy-to-use fundraising solutions. More importantly about Brad is that he's my friend and he's the self-proclaimed president of the Alex Perry fan club. I don't know if you all realized or not that I have my own little fan club and Brad is the president. He nominated himself and I approved. So if you'd like to join, feel free. We're looking to fill members now. But anyway, Brad answered my call for questions around public speaking. And the question that he asked was, how do I know what's important to my audience? And this is such a great question because I know for myself and I know from working with other speakers that it can be really tricky to know what's important to your audience. And many times we can confuse what's important to us as being important to other people. So just because I care about it means other people care about it, which is not true. So as I normally do, I'm going to give you the really simple answer to this, but I want to remind you of why it's so important to figure out what's important to your audience. It's because of these reasons. You want to establish trust and credibility with the people that you're talking to. So if you're talking to your leadership team or you're talking to a potential client, a general audience where there might be opportunities for you to get more work, it's important to, I just almost knocked over my microphone. Podcasting fail. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's really important to establish trust and credibility with people. And you also want to convert people from being bystanders, people who are just watching you talk or listening to you talk. You want them to be actively engaged. So if you're an executive leader and you're trying to pass an initiative through or get quote unquote buy-in, you want to make sure that you are talking about what's important to people, because when you can talk about what's important to them, then you get the opportunity to create trust, credibility, and active engagement. And this gets missed in public speaking and communication training so much because the first place that our minds go when we think about talking to other people is, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And man, have I made that mistake only about every day. Every day. It's easy to do. We are taught from the get-go, like, think about what you're going to say, and words are important. And I preach all of that too, but there's a really important step that we have to get to before we can really talk to people about what's important to them. And so that step, the really easy answer, if you want to know what's important to your audience, if you want to know what they want to hear about, you've got to listen to them. You've got to listen to them, and then you've got to talk about what's important. So, and if you want to know what's important, you've got to ask them. Ask them, and then listening. It's that simple. Simple, but not easy. We've talked about simple, but not easy before. But if you want to know what is important to other people, you've got to ask them, and then you got to zip it and listen to what they have to say. So listening is a skill that remains virtually untaught in schools. We look at children and just expect them to do it. Maybe you do. But in many instances, listening is not a skill that's taught with any particular sort of form or structure. I know many of the communication classes that I've been through, the public speaking courses I've taken, public speaking courses I've given, trainings, etc., all of these things, very few start with listening. Then they might start with mindset, they might start with preparation, anything and everything but listening. They might start with something vague like research, which you could look at research as a potential way of listening to someone. But to be direct and say, before we speak to other people, we need to listen to them, especially if we care about influencing them, if we care about what's important to them, we've got to listen to them first. I say it this way. There's this phrase in public speaking, and you probably know this, which is to know your audience. And I always think that that's a funny phrase because going in, I've never really known anyone without listening. And I have made the mistake of walking into a group and not asking questions beforehand and just basically assuming that I know what they want to hear about because I'm excited about it, right? Like I like to talk about executive presence or I like to talk about public speaking, but how on earth do I know that that's really important to the people that I'm going to speak to? I don't know. So I've got to ask. And I mean, dang it. You know what they say about assuming. You know what they say. Assuming it makes I'll let you fill in the blank there. If you want to know what people are interested in, if you want to know what they need and what they want to hear, you have to ask them and you have to listen to them. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what this might look like in your work and professional life. So much of the work that I do is with professionals that want to be better communicators. So let me run through a couple of examples of where and how you might listen to someone. So let's take, for example, you want to present a new initiative to your executive leaders. Where many folks start is you think, okay, I've got to present this. I've got to do all the research on the data. I've got to complete 45 slides and an endless stream of data graphs and information. And you work and you work and you work and you do all of this research so you can present your new initiative to the executive leadership team. It's a lot of work. My suggestion is before you do that work, before you even guess that might be what they want, that they might want all of the research and they might want 45 slides and they might want every little bit of detail, I would suggest that you go to a person on the executive leadership team and tell them what you want to do. And then ask them some specific questions. So you're going to tell them, you're going to say, hey, Bob, maybe it's Bob. Bob is the executive leader that you feel like you can approach with your questions about how do I ask the leadership team for what I want? Or how do I present this new initiative to my leadership team? So you're going to go to Bob and you're going to ask him a couple of questions that are going to sound something like this. If I'm going to get buy-in from the leadership team on an idea, what's the best way to build my business case and present the data? Did you hear that question? What's the best way to build the business case and present the data? So if you ask Bob that, the answer that you're going to get from Bob is the exact way that your leadership team wants information presented to them. Boom, you have an answer. That's amazing because then you can go and you can deliver that. You don't have to spend the guesswork of hoping that the 16 slides that you have build the case or the 17 graphs of data builds the case. You're going to know exactly what to pick and choose from what you already have to present to them. A couple of other questions that you can ask Bob in this scenario is, what order is most beneficial for you and the rest of the team when I present information? Order is really important because many times, especially with an executive leadership team, everybody's on a really tight time crunch. And while you may feel the need to build the case with lots and lots of data, they might want you to start with the endpoint. They might want you to say, we need you to ask for the budget first, and then we'll ask you questions and let you support it with data. So instead of coming at me with all the details first, I want you to come at me with the main point and then let me ask questions. So Bob might be able to tell you that. He might tell you the reverse. He might say, you gotta show us all the data first. We don't know because we don't know. We don't know unless we ask. Another great question you can ask Bob in this case, before you go to the leadership team, before you start preparing without talking to someone, you can ask, what should I avoid? Ooh, isn't that a pro move? So in this case, you can avoid things like if your executive leadership team doesn't want a PowerPoint with 17 pictures that are obscure and they don't understand, you can avoid doing that. If your executive leadership team doesn't want some big, long, drawn out story, you don't have to prepare that. You can get straight to your point and do what you want to do. And or you could avoid boring them with data. Maybe they do want to see a picture. Maybe they do want you to simplify it. You don't know unless you ask. And once you ask, you've got to listen and then deliver exactly what it is that they're talking about, exactly what it is that they want. You want to make it easy for them to make the decision to buy into your initiative or to give you the budget for the initiative. Whatever decision you want them to make, you want to make it easy. And so go to them and find out what makes it easy. I'm going to give you another example. So because I work with a lot of presenters, so you're going to go present at a conference, or like you're going to go do a keynote, or you're going to do a breakout session. So, and you're wondering what is most important to this audience. You're going to go to the event organizer and you're going to ask a couple of questions. For example, what do the members most need to hear? You're going to ask if there are members of the organization that you can talk to where you can gather their interests and their questions and find out what's important to them. Go straight to the source. This actually came from my good friend, Rebecca Fleetwood Hessian. So I want to make sure I note her. She gave me that suggestion a while ago, and it's brilliant because when you can go to the audience and ask them what they want, you can deliver what they want, and you can find stories. You can use their stories. So you're not having to make things up or do guesswork, which is so incredibly important in speaking because you're there to give people what they're looking for. That's why you wanted to talk to begin with. You want to help them solve their problem. You want to inspire them to do something different. You want to teach them something new. But how can you do that if you've never listened to them and you've never asked them? And then the last question in those lunch and learn sessions and really in anything is you can ask, what does success look like? When you talk to that event organizer, you can ask them, what do you want the people in the audience thinking? What do you want them saying? And what do you want them doing? And again, I've learned this from some big influencers in my life, from Jenny Robbins and Jason Barnaby and Rebecca. All of those people in my life have shared this piece of information, which is make sure you know before you go to present, what does success look like at the end of it? Many times, I know I have felt that success for me looks like, reams and reams and reams of positive aspects about how I performed, which is actually not the point. The point is, did I create change or did I plant a new thought in someone else? Did I get someone to think differently? So reframing what your expectations of success, what does success look like, not from your point of view, but from the audience's point of view. And the same thing applies. So if we're going to determine how do I know what's important to my audience, like say you're going to do a lunch and learn session, either with your company or for another company, again, going to the group that you're going to talk to and ask them, what do they want to talk about? And I'll give you an example that I had here recently. I was slated to speak to an organization here in Indianapolis, and I was slated to talk about storytelling as a means to enhance your personal brand, which sounds like a great talk. It would be lots and lots of fun. However, what has since happened since I scheduled that talk was COVID and shelter in place. And so I reached out to the organizers and I said, hey, number one, I know that we're going to do this in a different format. And number two, this topic doesn't feel relevant right now. This topic doesn't seem to make sense. So what are the things right now that your people are worried about? What are they thinking about? What can I bring to the table that's really going to benefit them that isn't necessarily something that I had planned previously or something that I have expertise in? So knowing in advance that what you might bring to the table may not be what your audience needs. So going in, finding out, asking the question of what else could we talk about? And if there's not anything, maybe you're not the right person to talk. So knowing that, don't just go in there and say, well, I'm going to talk about this, whether it's relevant or not. But with this particular group, what we figured out was we could very much do a talk that said talking with humans, because right now we're looking to create intentional connections. We're looking to, again, establish trust and credibility and to lead in lead throughout this pandemic. So that's the talk we created, but that wouldn't have happened had I not gone to them, had I not asked what they really needed to hear and then listened to it and then developed something or pulled something from my repertoire of things that I can do to be able to deliver that to them. A couple of other questions you can ask are, what will the group anticipate when a speaker comes in? So if you're going to do a lunch and learn session, is the group accustomed to things like PowerPoints, or do they prefer an informal conversation? Not every group expects or anticipates the same thing. So it's important to know, to ask them what's important. Is it important that I have a slide deck, or is it not important? Is it important that they get to engage, or is it important to them to have the opportunity to sit back, listen, and process the information? Again, always talking with a member of the group that you're going to go speak to so you can gather their stories and use them as reference points, and wrapping it up with what does success look like. Those are just a few of the examples of how you would go about asking and then listening to your audience so you know what's important to them, so you can talk about what's important to them or not talk. If you don't have something to take to that audience that's important to them, then why are you in front of that audience? So when Brad asks me, how do I know what's important to someone? You don't know until you ask. And after asking comes listening, repeating back what you've heard, asking questions to clarify, really making sure that you are active in the process with them. It does take time. It takes effort, and there's a lot of folks out there in public speaking that want to do the lather, rinse, repeat method. I'm going to create something and I'm going to deliver the same thing over and over and over again. And sometimes that works. I think there's a better way. I think there's a way that says, I'm going to honor what the audience wants to hear. So I'm going to take the content, the pieces that I know, and I'm going to shift it and gear it toward them, and really make sure that what I am bringing to the table is important to them, that it is going to benefit them. And I'm going to know that because I've listened to them in the first place. It takes time and it takes effort, and it's 100% worth it, because when you listen to other people, when you truly listen, when you ask a great question and then you listen, you create trust and credibility, and you'll learn what the other person needs to move forward and engage with you, with the initiative, with whatever call to action that you want them to take. It will happen if you listen to them. That's what you want, isn't it? I think so. Okay, so that is it for today. Thank you again, Brad, for asking the question and allowing me to answer it for you. And I'm super excited because I have some big news. I have big news. So I've been doing these podcasts solo for a while to get the hang of them and to get the flow. And I have scheduled my very first guest, and I'm so excited about this. And maybe you'll be excited and maybe you won't. But for all of my Netflix Waco fans, I'm going to be interviewing Gary Nesmith, who is the FBI agent that the Netflix series Waco is based off of. I believe it actually started as a Paramount Pictures series, and then it went to Amazon Prime, and now it's on Netflix. But I'll have to ask Gary to confirm all of that. But Gary is going to be on my show. And just a little bit about Gary, if you'll indulge me. So he's a retired FBI agent. He retired in 2003 following a 30-year career as an investigator, instructor, and a negotiator. He had a significant focus of his career that was directed toward investigating Middle East hijackings in which American citizens were victimized. In addition to that, he was an FBI hostage negotiator for 23 years of his career, retiring as chief of the FBI's Crisis Negotiation Unit, Critical Incident Response Group, the first person to ever hold that position. In that capacity, he was heavily involved in numerous crisis incidents covering prison riots, right-wing militia standoffs, religious zealot sieges, terrorist embassy takeovers, airplane hijackings, and over 120 overseas kidnapping cases involving American citizens. I can barely get through all of this. Oh my goodness, he's going to talk to me, the minivan mogul. I'm so excited. So following his retirement from the FBI, he became a senior vice president with Control Risks, an international risk consultancy assisting clients in managing overseas kidnap incidents. He currently speaks at law enforcement conferences and corporate gatherings around the world. He's appeared in numerous television documentaries about hostage negotiation, terrorism, and kidnapping produced by the History Channel, National Geographic, We Channel, Discovery, TLC, A&E, CNN, CBS, BBC, the American Heroes Network, and others. He's been interviewed in Time, Forbes, The New Yorker, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Roll Call, The oh my gosh, I'm going to say that wrong. Oh, Gary, forgive me. The Washingtonian magazine, the Christian Science Monitor, and other publications. He has given speeches at major universities, has done interviews on numerous radio and television programs, and was the subject of an hour-long interview on NPR's Fresh Air in 2010. He wrote a book about his FBI negotiation career, which was published by Penguin Random House in 2010, entitled Stalling for Time: My Life as an FBI Hostage Negotiator. And I told you about this. This is how I found Gary. It's the TV event Waco is based in part on his book. So for all of you who Netflix binged Waco, this is the guy. So he's portrayed in the 6-part series by the 2-time Academy Award nominated actor Michael Shannon. And oh my gosh, that's a mouthful. I'm so excited for you to meet Gary and to learn from him like I already have. He has been incredibly gracious to me, the minivan mogul, first guest on my podcast. I point blank told him, I was like, I have like 4 listeners and one of them's my mom. Are you sure you're cool with doing this? And he said, absolutely. So that tells you in advance the kind of person that Gary is. So I'm excited for you to meet him. I'm excited to do the interview, and we're going to buckle up and we're going to go for quite the ride. I can't wait. I'm so excited. So I do hope you'll join me for that. I can't wait to share it with you. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening. I am Alex Perry, the owner of Practically Speaking, where I coach and keynote all things public speaking, storytelling, and communication. You can find me on LinkedIn under Alex Perry and on Instagram and Facebook at PS with Alex. You also will want to stay in touch with me via my weekly newsletter, which you can sign up for on my website, pswithalex.com. And as always, you're not going to find me on Twitter because Twitter scares me. Thanks so much for joining me today. I look forward to talking with you soon, and take care.